Hi, Ala. Welcome back to our weekly podcast. How are you today?
Mustafa, I'm doing great. I think this is a great topic we want to talk about, and it helps many people with a closed work permit.
The last time we discussed the CEC class, which typically involves people with postgraduate open work permits, graduates from universities and colleges in Canada who are able to do 1 year of work experience in Canada. But there's also another category of work permit holders. They may also qualify for the CEC, which are closed work permit holders. These are people who have received an LMIA supported job offer. And the difference between an open work permit and a closed work permit is that closed work permit holders can only work for the employer that is named on their work permit. And I was looking at some stats, Ala. I want to share these with you because this number is mind-boggling. So according to Statista, which is a really well-regarded statistics website in Canada, in 2022, Ala, there were 119,000 closed work permit holders in Canada. 119,000. So you can see how many people are in Canada under this status, right? Now, a lot of these folks are doing really well. We've spoken to many who are working with very high-end tech firms, getting paid in the six figures on an LMIA. These are IT folks, web developers, some high-ranking managers, etc. These are called either high-wage LMIA holders or LMIA holders under the Global Talent Stream, or intercompany transfer employees who don't need an LMI but still are on a closed work permit because they can only work for the company that's named on their work permit. So a lot of these folks that we're talking to are doing really well and are in fantastic jobs, and we congratulate them for their ability to stay in Canada on this kind of work permit, and that's a separate story. What we want to talk about today is a whole other category. Most of these LMIAs, Ala, are being issued to people who are being exploited. These are restaurant managers, cooks, chefs, people who may work on farms, low-wage LMIA holders, or they might be high-wage based on the definition, but are still working in sort of the sales industry or the tourism and hospitality industry. What you will notice, Ala, is that a lot of these people are being exploited. I know you talk to a lot of folks. Tell me about this whole thing to do with LMIA for sale. What are your comments and thoughts on that? We've seen a lot of that happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is a black market of LMIA for sale, which is 100% illegal. Unfortunately, people are doing it, and employers and some ghost consultants are charging for getting them be hired. Either they are inside Canada or outside Canada.
Yes, and some of the numbers that we've seen for how much these LMIs are being sold for is insane, like 40,000, 50,000. Remember we talked to one person who paid 40,000 for a 1 year LMIA, and the employer said, "I'm not going to renew your work permit unless you pay me another $40,000. That's absolutely insane. Wouldn't you say that it's probably better just to invest in yourself in a master's degree?
That is true. That is very true. But there are many employers that, and many workers will coming with genuine LMIs as well. So we have both.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. But today's topic is addressing those people who are not in a genuine LMI. And here's the thing. The reason why I want to bring that up and address that is they should not be hesitant to consider whether there is a way to get out of their situation. Because what's happening with a lot of these closed work permits is the employers are exploiting them. They're able to use the control of a closed work permit because a closed work permit, you can only work for one employer. And if the employer says you're fired, now the person is in a very difficult legal situation in Canada in terms of their immigration status. And so they are very scared to speak up or demand their rightful wages, or to compel the employer to stick to the terms of the contract. And so Canada has recognized this issue, and they have introduced a way for these closed work permit holders to switch to an open work permit holder if they can prove that they are being abused, or if they are in a vulnerable situation, or even if there is a risk that they might be in a vulnerable situation. So that's what I want to talk to today, because I, I want people who are in that situation to listen to this video, and if they see themselves in what we are going to describe today, they should talk to us, because there is a way to get out of that situation without putting yourself in trouble. Yes, Allah.
Now we are going to define what all these definition that you mentioned, what is defined in IRCC.
Yes.
But it's very important to understand that there might be sometimes a misunderstanding. So the people can be the genuine LMIA here. If you remember, we had one client who was coming from Malta. We applied for a work permit for him, a closed work permit. And he ended up working in a small shop in a remote area in Alberta. Okay? And then he was saying that I did not know that this is my situation. This is not the problem of the employer, because before applying, you have to have an understanding for where are you exactly going, what are the job responsibilities. This is exactly what was defined for you, and it was your responsibility to ask this kind of question from your employer. Or another example is the cultural difference. We had a client that who was coming as a construction supervisor. True, the client was from Middle East, and the construction supervisor over there has a different definition. It's like a managerial position. But construction supervisor is exactly something else. You have to work more than your laborers over there. So this doesn't define to be abused or abused from your employer. That's why we are going to talk about the definition which is explained by RCC.
You bring very valid points. Just because you're in a situation that you didn't think that you would be into in terms of the factors, doesn't mean that you're being abused. Abuse has a very, very specific definition, and I for example, like, it may not even be abuse if your employer is asking you to work on a Sunday. It's very common in Canada for people to have to take extra shifts to help the business out, right? I mean, we have to work on Sunday. We wouldn't say that we are abusing each other, right? Sometimes we have to do our job, and so abuse has a very, very specific definition. However, the fact of the matter is, Allah, regardless of all these disclaimers that you have said, people are being abused. Right? This is definitely happening in Canada. There is no doubt about it. There are many employers who are, trying to profit off of these folks by charging them from an LMIA and then making them work in very abusive conditions to maximize their profits. And they can do that because they know the person on the other hand has no recourse. What are they going to do? They're going to, they're not going to jeopardize their status in Canada. So we want to really focus on those folks, right? Not people who had a misunderstanding, or people who ended up living in a place where they didn't think that this is what their expectation to Canada would be. Those are not the right audience for this video. This is for folks who are being financially abused, emotionally abused, verbally abused, physically abused, and we're going to get into all that. So this is the program. It's called the Open Work Permit for Vulnerable Workers International Mobility Program. This is the exact legislation that authorizes this program. And really, this is what it boils down to. Migrant workers in Canada on a valid employer-specific work permit, in other words, a closed work permit, who are experiencing abuse or who are at risk of abuse in the context of their employment may be eligible to receive an open work permit that is exempt from an LMIA as per IRPR regulations. Okay, so this is really what this is about. And again, the first thing is definition of abuse. What is abuse, Allah? Okay, abuse is defined as physical abuse, right? So forcible confinement or assault. So you can imagine, let's imagine a farm where, farms are really far away from city centers, and often those workers have to live on the farm, right? If and the employer has to meet very specific standards for their housing and their food and their care, right? And there should be movement of freedom for them as well. So if there is a farm that is not following any of those standards and it is providing substandard housing, where the health of the person is at risk, and if they are enforcing curfews on these people where they're not allowed to leave the farms, within a certain amount of time, or if they're taking their passports, holding their passports hostage, it is 100% illegal and would meet the definition of physical abuse, and perhaps also even psychological abuse, right? So physical abuse is there. Sexual abuse obviously goes without saying. Even if you're in a situation, where everything is legitimate, right? Genuine LMIA, genuine job, the employer is paying you, but this employer is a creep, and he is giving you unwanted sexual attention and harassment, or God forbid something even worse, and you are somebody who is experiencing that, and you really want to get out of that situation, but you can't because your status is tied to this employer, this program would be available to you. So if you're somebody in that situation, come talk to us and we can help you out. Okay. The other is psychological abuse. Now, this is, everything is okay. There's no sexual abuse involved. There's no assault or physical violence involved. But the person is holding this power over your head and constantly reminding you that you better do what I tell you, or A, B, C, D, and you feel helpless. Again, you have to understand, Ella, this is a relationship of a huge power imbalance. The power that the employer has over an employee, especially a closed work permit holder, is insane, right? An open work permit holder doesn't have to worry about that. They can quit and go look for another job, right? Their status will still be valid. Closed work permit holders are bound to their employers. So if you see that your employer is engaged in these types of activities, like threats and intimidation to get you to do something, and you feel afraid to speak up because you know that you're in a tough spot in terms of your immigration status, the definition of abuse is met. Financial abuse. This is something that I feel is the most common that happens in this space, right? So if your employer is now in an LMIA, is only approved when you specify what wages per hour you're going to pay the employee, right? And the employer must pay the wage that's stated on the approved job offer, okay? But what we see is a lot of folks, these employers, they are paying them the wage. In other words, the payroll data is going to show the right wage, right? But then they're going to make the employer pay back some dollars per hour in cash, so that they can keep the wages as low as possible, so that they can maximize their profits. This is something that we've come across multiple times, and this would be financial abuse, right? Or there was one situation where the person stopped paying the employee at all, no wages, and they were just running a fake payroll for them, and in fact was making the closed work permit holder pay the withholding taxes on it too. So no wage. So not even that. So he was like, "Don't come to work. I don't want you working for me. All right, I will just issue you a payroll, so that you can maintain your status. But you have to, the taxes that are the withholding taxes off that payroll, you have to pay me, right?" So not only does this person not have any work, doesn't have the ability to make any money, they're paying a monthly installment just to keep their visa. Completely abusive, completely illegal. And if you're in that situation, there is a way out for you. And reprisals as well. So if you feel that by pursuing this situation, there might be threat of reprisal. In fact, here is the definition. Reprisal is defined as consisting of any measure that is taken by or on behalf of an employer against a foreign national and that adversely affects the foreign national's employment or working condition because the foreign national has reported that the condition set out in the section has not been complied with. So in other words, if you feel afraid to report this activity, to the authorities, the employer is not allowed to take revenge or have any sort of reaction to retaliate, right? This is called reprisal. So you're protected under this legislation, so that they want you to encourage to report these things. Okay. Some examples could be a disciplinary measure, demotion, dismissal, or any threat to take the measures mentioned above. Now, here are some examples of what physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological and financial abuse looks like. So take a look. Hitting, beating, slapping, punching, choking, obviously. Confining a worker, right? Living conditions are unsafe or unsanitary. Forcing or pressuring the worker to work under conditions that are unsafe or pose a risk to their health.
I think might happen to many workers here.
Yeah, especially in
construction, right?
Yeah, construction, remote farms, so if you feel that you are in a situation that is the employer is being negligent in terms of their responsibility to keep you safe and secure, then you should at least come and talk to us, and we'll make an assessment of whether your situation rises to the level of physical abuse. Okay. Next is sexual abuse. I think that this is pretty self-explanatory. But even look, Ala, even suggesting, attempting, or completing, it's not even like, even suggesting or attempting a sexual act is considered to be sexual abuse, right? So if someone is making you uncomfortable by making, weird, creepy comments, it's considered to be sexual abuse. It doesn't have to be, the physical act itself. It can be these, you can imagine, right, Ala, like in a workplace, there's a female or male, and the employer is making them very uncomfortable by making suggestive remarks. It's considered to be sexual abuse. Psychological abuse. Okay. Now this, Ala, is a little bit more gray area, right? Because you could have a very demanding boss, especially in kitchens, for example. Chefs can be very rough and tough with their employees because they have to, meet their KPIs in their kitchen. But insulting, intimidating, humiliating, harassing, threatening, name-calling, yelling, shaming, ridiculing, disrespecting, and criticizing a worker, controlling what the worker can and can't do, threatening a worker with murder, intimidating, threatening, harming worker with a knife, gun, or other object or weapon, or using religious or spiritual beliefs to manipulate, dominate, control a worker. Now, I think these would be very clear instances of psychological abuse. This would be a little bit of a gray area, I've been in many situations as an employee where it was a very high pressure environment, and the boss did insult, intimidate, humiliate, harass me. Now, of course, respect to immigration status or deportation, that I think would be a very clear cut of psychological abuse. You don't do that. But I think here a client needs to be very careful. Like, is this just a tough boss, or is this actually harassment? In the workplace, especially in the West, you can't really have a fragile disposition. You have to be able to take some tough management. So very careful in this situation to know whether you just have a tough boss or whether it's actually, abuse. And then also, Ally says here that it's abuse is a pattern of coercive or controlling behavior. So if somebody did something once or twice, it's probably not going to work. It needs to be a consistent pattern. Any comments so far on these examples, Ally?
No, that makes it very clear that the clients, the workers differentiate between the harassment and being a having a strict boss.
Mm-hmm. Financial abuse. This is, where really most of the stuff that we feel, the shady stuff, is happening. So failing to pay wages owed to the workers, right? So we advise you to really keep track of your hours. You see, a lot of these employers are very clever. They're not gonna want to leave a paper trail. They might do a Google Meet with you and tell you what your hours for that week was, right? And not put anything on paper. And then you might end up saying, oh, I thought you said these were my hours, and the guy would say, no, I didn't, and there's no proof there. So it's really important to if you're in a closed work permit holder and there are bad payroll practices, keep track of your own hours. And evidence. Keep track of your own hours, calculate how much you were supposed to get paid, and then see how much you were actually paid. Have evidence of how much you were paid, and then if there's a discrepancy, bring that up with your employer, and have evidence of that communication as well. These are the things that can really help your case. We're going to talk about what type of evidence is required later on, but employers who are engaged in these practices, Ala, they know what they're doing. They know that they are doing something illegal. So they're very clever about hiding their tracks. Stealing a worker's money, coercing them into giving these things up. And this is something that we had an opportunity to learn from one of the people that talked to us, that they were forced to give back some dollars per hour from the cash that they received from their employer. Okay. Limiting their financial resources, withholding money or credit cards, requiring a worker to deposit money into their bank account for fraudulent purposes, closely monitoring how a worker spends money, destroying a worker's property, spending a worker's money without their consent, charging a worker's fee for a job that doesn't exist.
That is very interesting, Mustafa. Closely monitoring how a worker spends money. A few years ago, we had a client that the employer was giving a salary to him and is asking that, what did you do with the money? Well, I already gave you $3,000 last month. What did you do with the money? So why do you need me to pay you another month? So this is a very clear example.
Even though the person earned that money?
Yeah, he said, I pay you $3,000. What exactly? You are a single person. Why did you spend it?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's ridiculous. And the thing is, guys, it's really important to note, this may happen to you once, and you might be shocked. Okay. And that might not be enough, unfortunately, for you to bring a case like this, right? And if it happens to you the first time, the thing you should do is you should have your radars up immediately. So like, okay, this is weird. Now you want to be prepared with a strategy to document if it happens again, right? Because these things are convincing when there is a pattern of these things. Like a one-time thing, unless it's something very egregious, right? So for example, you worked so much and you were owed like this $3,000 a month. I think, withholding wages, that much wages would be a one-time event, would be enough. But these things like, if it happens to you once, you should have your radar up and come up with a strategy to gather evidence and see if this is a pattern of behavior, and have the ability to document that pattern, because it's going to be very important for your case. Okay. Reprisal. Any measures taken, we read this definition before, but this is what it looks like. Imposing a penalty, for example, transfer of work location or reduction of hours or benefits, right? So for example, if you say, hey, clean up your freezer, there's a lot of expired meat, we might get sick, and he goes, if you ever say that to me again, I'll fire you, or I'll reduce your hours. Or in fact, he even does that. You made that statement, and all of a sudden you're noticing that the hours are being reduced. That's retaliation. Okay, So termination, intimidation, coercion. So basically, what this is trying to say is workers should not be afraid to demand better from their employer in terms of safety, health, job. The employer is required to respect the worker. The worker, just because the worker is on a closed work permit, doesn't mean they're not a human. Doesn't mean that labor laws don't apply to the worker. You're still legally employed in Canada, and labor laws apply to you as well. And so this rule is basically there to encourage or to discourage employers from like silencing their employees to speak up when they notice something is not the way it should be. Okay. Here are some of these examples. I'm not going to go over them again because we discussed many examples already. The way you apply for this is filling out a online work permit. That's something that we would do as your representatives in this situation. Now, evidence of abuse. You must provide sufficient evidence with your application to satisfy the officer that there are reasonable grounds to believe that they are experiencing or at risk of experiencing abuse in the context of their employment in Canada. Okay, the migrant workers describe the abuse or risk of abuse they face by submitting a letter of explanation. This is something that we would prepare for you after a series of consultations and reviewing your evidence. Now, here are some of the pieces of evidence that you would need. You would need a statement or report from an abuse support organization, medical doctor, healthcare professional, or such entity. This would be in the case of, let's say, physical or sexual abuse, right? If you are claiming sexual abuse, God forbid, like forcible rape, then you should go to a doctor and in that instance and have a report made, and then use that report as evidence against your abuser. Okay. You will need a sworn statement by the applicant. There is no optionality here. If you are going to go for this route, you need to be committed to this process. And because we do talk to a lot of people who are afraid to go for this, either because they're afraid that the owner might come back and take actions against them, or they're also afraid that their action might lead to other employees being at risk for abuse or whatever. But if you are in a abusive situation, like, if you can claim this process, then your co-workers can also claim this process, and you can help all of them come out of an abusive situation, right? So that's something to keep in note. You will need a sworn statement. A copy of an official complaint form filed with the enforcement agency. This is something that we would take care of. Supporting or additional materials such as victim impact statements, hard copies of email messages, photos, document. You are even allowed to, I'm not sure if Ontario is a one-party recording thing, but so in Canada, you are allowed to record a conversation that is between you and the employer, even if the employer does not consent to that recording. Okay, so if you want to get some evidence against them, record their phone calls. All right, these people are engaged in criminal activity, as far as I'm concerned, and they should be held accountable. So record away, okay, now, this is some legal stuff, reasonable grounds to believe. And we're not going to get into that. If you come and do a consultation with us, then we can explain this to you in that situation. This is more about, this is more for us. When we are analyzing your situation, we have to look at these rules and say, will the visa officer, based on what's in front of us, have reasonable grounds to believe whether abuse is taking place? And so that's it. Oh, yes. There is also going to be an interview. So once a case is filed, an immigration officer will come and interview you about your situation. And you can do this interview in person, over the telephone, or if you don't want to talk to a visa officer and you just want to do a paper interview, that option is also available. You submit this application. If approved, your work permit will be converted from a closed work permit to an open work permit, and then you will be able to work for any employer in Canada.
Great, Mustafa. I think that was a great learning for us and then for the people out there. And then if you are in this situation, make sure to contact us and we're going to have a consultation with you.
Great. See you next week with another topic. We haven't decided what we're going to talk about yet, but we will be posting these more regularly. All the best, and we hope to see you guys all soon in a consultation. Take care. Bye-bye.